winless for now. They will be back. Shout out to WGM, Nemo, and Grandmaster Benjamin Bach. Now we have coming up our casters calling all the shots. Grandmaster Amon Hamilton and Grandmaster Eric Hansen. What's up, boys? We got another one.
James, we are getting right into the action here, and it's actually featuring the same player, right? Nihal Sarin playing back-to-back matches. Eric, at this point, you just have to wonder, is he going to keep doing it? It feels like he's on a magical run right now.
I think he's going to keep doing it, but I can tell you if he has the same position against MVL, MVL's not going to let him off the hook. I think what we witnessed was almost a once-in-a-lifetime situation.
Yep, it really feels that way. So we got to, settle down. We're into the next match. This is a decider match as well. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Team Vitality. This is going to be a big one, Eric, because, they've played before, but Maxime probably coming in feeling like the favorite as well. Nihal has played some more matches as well, and let's get right into things. This is an E4, E5 game. Knight E7, Knight G6. A little bit unusual, more standard would be the knight coming to F6, but Knight G6, definitely seen before.
Definitely seen before. It's become quite trendy in speed chess. One of the ideas in the future is Black, after they castle, is actually willing to take on D4. The reason Black's willing to take on D4 is he's going to immediately respond. E takes D4, C takes D4 with a break, pawn D7 to D5. And you notice that bishop on A7, it's not normally there in some of these Roy Lopez's. It puts pressure on the center.
Yeah, bishop G5, F6. Pretty much a forced move at that point because the queen was stuck on D8, and you're definitely not going to take the knight you just put on G6 and put it back.
And we see why you provoke F6. Now that D5 move isn't as strong because there could be a pin on that king on G8, Black's queen. White's job is to make either D5 or F5 for Black hard to accomplish.
And F5 would be, a desirable move because it helps that bishop on C8 get involved. Right now, the move bishop to G4, not that effective because we can just play H3. If you're MVL, you respond H3 to bishop G4, and what happens is the bishop can't retreat back to H5. It would get trapped because there is a knight on G6. So a few differences in this position to maybe a more standard conventional setup.
Yeah, we're going to see a prolonged tension, I think, in the middle. You don't really want to ever do D takes E5 as white. Why? Because Black recaptures F takes E5. That rook on F5 all of a sudden has the F file. And even trading off dark squared bishops doesn't necessarily help White. Those are good bishops to trade off. And then you'll notice Black's remaining pawns in the center on dark squares. It's not that easy to break. White needs what White wants. Eventually, keep the tension and hope that Black has to play E takes D4, then you recapture, then you have some squares. So in the future, I want to go knight D2 to F1 to G3, maybe queen D2, rook A1, eventually creep towards the king side.
Yeah, and actually it's kind of reminding me of a game that we casted earlier, Eric, with Duda playing with the black pieces, where we might see a lot of maneuvering. We have a really, really solid structure. The pawns from C7 up to E5, all the way down to G7. It's a really, really strong formation, but at the same time, you can't really do anything with it, right? You can't play F5 yet. You can't play D5. You don't want to take in the center. So the pawns look great, but they're probably not going to move for a while, which means we're going to see a lot of maneuvering.
I mentioned that generally White doesn't want to trade the dark squared bishops, but if you think in a few moves, Black completes development. If Black ever shifts that rook on A8 to D8, then White's looking for the right time to move that D pawn because then the bishop on A7 will be loose.
Yeah, and actually that's a great point because immediately if White plays rook AD1, Black plays rook AD8, you can grab the pawn in the middle of the board, D takes E5. If the bishop from A7 that's loose captures on E3, you can take back potentially with the pawn, right? F takes E3, hits the knight on F4. It's a perfect example of what you were highlighting.
I have to say, this kind of position probably favors both players, but White's certainly happy to have a position, all the pawns, all the pieces on the board. This isn't some sort of equal drive position. A lot can happen here. And one of the ideas for White is to play knight to F5. At the right moment, you see that queen on E8, you see your rook on E1. When you play knight F5, you're trying to induce bishop takes F5, E takes F5, because then all of a sudden there might be a pin on the E file that you can take advantage of.
That's right, and we see exactly that move played. Rook D8 played quickly. Because the knight's on F5, things are a little bit more loose than before, but I have to be looking at that move, D takes E5, that we were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, there's a bunch of pins. That move might have worked, but black was also preparing his own bishop takes f5 in certain lines,
Exactly.
hitting the queen on d2. So Maxime plays rook 81, and I think he's planning on playing either queen c2 or queen c1 next. Nihal plays bishop b8, getting out of that idea.
Yep, exactly. And things are starting to shift. You notice how there's not really any action on the queen side here. Players are moving the pieces towards the center, but there's also still a lot of potential on the king side. I look at that knight on f4, and it's always about removing the knight. The knight on f5 can't be removed that easily. Black would have to move the knight on g6 away, but it needs to be there to support the knight on f4. For white, on the other hand, the move g3 is exactly how I want to remove that knight. Whether I play it right away, Eric, or play king h2 and then g3, I think we'll see that soon.
I think we'll see that soon, and that's why he played d5. He sees if your king goes to h2 with that bishop on b8, maybe black plays c6 or d5, looking to get a discover attack on the king. When you play d5, now you can play king h2, and you're not worried about that bishop on b8 being a problem. So Maxime grabs the space, Nihal goes knight back, and I have to say, the last few moves to me indicate white is doing well. When black invests time to put a knight on f4 and you only have to spend g3 to kick it out, that has to be a plus.
Absolutely. He's removing itself from the great f4 square. Now, it probably would have happened anyway, king h2 and g3, but look at the quality of the pieces now. The bishop on b8. We don't even need to compare it to the bishop on e3. It's obvious. The bishop on b8 is trapped. That was also why Maxime pushed the pawn into the center with d5. Wanted to prevent maybe c6 and d5 from happening from Nihal to free that bishop. The knight on h5, pretty much trapped on the side of the board. Eric, the quality of the pieces here, it doesn't feel equal at all. A huge advantage here for Maxime, and he's not up any material. This is just purely a positional and strategic advantage.
Yeah, that bishop on b8's a bad piece. I don't see how you correct that.
Yeah.
At some point, you're looking at the move c6 is black. You need to fight for a space. You need to open things up. But when you play c6, d6 becomes a serious target. Not only that, when you push your pawn to c6, the b6 square gets weakened too. Maybe white places a bishop there. And look at g4. Things are getting sharp.
Oh, yeah.
Where's that knight on f4 going, Aman? I can move my knight back to g3. If you ever take on g3, I do f takes g3, the knight on f4 is trapped. This is a critical position for Nihal because he's really lacking oxygen in the position.
Yeah, and we could see g3 was about to be played, and then as soon as the knight jumped in f4, it's actually g4. The knight on h5 is trapped no matter what, and the knight on f4 now took the only available square. g6 is a desperate move, but I love your suggestion. Just drop that knight back. It moves to g3. If it's taken, we take back, and well, you're probably going to have to play knight g7, right, in order to avoid that. But if you drop the knight to g7, there's many moves to play, Eric, but right in front of us is just a free pawn. Bishop takes on f4.
It's more of a free pawn than you might expect because the bishop on b8 isn't in the game. I would be a little hesitant of giving up my dark squared bishop if black had a good dark squared bishop.
Right.
Black does not have a good dark squared bishop. MVL's doing well here, but we know that Nihal is such a resourceful player. He puts the bishop on a7. He admits, I probably don't have full compensation, but I best place my pieces on good squares. Now that you don't have a dark squared bishop, my bishop goes back to a7. Long term, it's going to put pressure on that diagonal, and it's up to MVL to figure out how can I contain that dark squared bishop and still keep pushing forward.
And at the end of the day, the bishop on a7 is finally active again. So Nihal, it actually seemed, Eric, that he was going to lose a pawn regardless. But in the end, it's kind of the best case scenario because, yes, he was going to lose that, but the bishop on a7 is actually a very decent piece now. I would expect white to probably improve that light squared bishop, maybe bishop c2. You could also bring the knight on f3 into d4 just to block that diagonal that the dark squared bishop for Nihal is on. But we have a different game here, and I do think that Nihal is objectively going to be happier with his position now than it was before because at some point it felt like none of his pieces could move.
Yeah, his position wasn't good before. This is an easier to play position, but I still think there's serious issues. The knight on g7 doesn't have a lot. When you see the move knight to d4, black's not in a position to really trade anything off. He's down an entire pawn here. I don't like the move bishop c2. I understand that maybe MVL is worried about Nihal eventually playing f5 and trying to blast things open. But counterintuitively, I actually thought that was fine for Maxime. He's up a pawn and he could actually afford some trades because that bishop on a7, what it means is in certain positions when black plays f5, white may have the e5 move. The bishop is not on b8. It's going to be very sharp. That probably favors Nihal because he knows he's already down a pawn. He's going to embrace a sharp position. But I don't like the bishop going on c2 because there's so many lines where I'm worried about my d pawn hanging. Black is looking to support play f6 to f5, blast things open. You see queen g8, why queen g8? When you play f5, you want that rook on f8, targeting the queen on f4.
Yep, and the queen on g8 still hits the d5 pawn, which is the main thing that gets weak. As soon as you play f5, if you play e takes f5, capturing from the center, the d pawn suddenly becomes loose. So there's a lot of ways that you can connect to those ideas. And, of course, other than f5, there really isn't a big plan for Nihal. The knight on g7, you look, it's 100% trapped. I think that MVL is making almost all his moves against that one plan. But the question, Eric, is he actually preventing it?
No, I think MVL is actually going the wrong plan here. I still like his position, but I liked his knight on f3. I don't think he needed to put the knight to d4, king g2, right beside the f2 pawn. You don't need to worry about that. I like the knight on f3. Why the knight on f3 and the queen on f4? I can place my queen on h6. I thought MVL could have placed his queen on h6, put his knight on f3, and then look towards knight h4 or g5. Some breaks. The knight on g7 is a poor piece. It can't harass the queen when it gets on h6. MVL here is playing some other moves, but you push those pawns forward. At some point, they could become weak. I think if I'm in MVL's shoes, I don't want this position with 2 minutes on the clock.
Right.
Because then the pressure is on you to convert, and you have to always watch out for the tactics. And there are going to be lots of tactics. It all surrounds whether or not black can play the f5 move. I don't want to have low time on the clock when f5 is eventually played.
And it's looking more and more likely because f5 also will open the g file potentially. And if the queen on g8 is very, very well placed against the king on g2.
He has to start making progress here. MVL has not made progress, in my opinion, in the last 5 moves. The queen should be back on f4. The knight should be back on f3. Sure, his pieces look okay right now, but they're not pushing black at all. Nihal's getting away with the position with the queen on g8. He's not under any pressure. He's down a pawn, but he doesn't feel like he's down a pawn because white's not using that extra pawn to grab space.
Yep.
You need pawns to push forward and take away squares. Look at this, the knight on h5. It didn't have a square before. It was on g7 stuck. Now the h file is open. The bishop on d7
is beautiful.
Nihal is coming back in this game, and I'm really starting to like his position.
Yep.
MVL has not made progress for a long time.
No, if anybody's position is improving, it's Nihal's. The rook on e5, flexible to recapture on h5. He's probably at the point, Eric, where he's even considering queen takes on h5, offering a queen trade while down a pawn. That's how good his position is, how much it's improved over the last couple moves. I still think that rook takes h5 is the right idea. I'm also wondering, at what point is Maxime starting to get concerned here? Because the bishops are just looking really scary. The h3 pawn is a huge target in the position. Yes, he can defend it. Rook g3, bring the rook to g1, but all of a sudden, feels like he's on the defensive.
He's on the defense because he hasn't done anything. He's actually shuffled his king to g2, to h2, and when we're looking at these rook takes h5 positions, I don't even know if I want my king on h2 because, as you mentioned, that pawn is pinned. White needs to incorporate this bishop on c2 in the game. Even the knight on d4, it looks pretty there, but it's not helping defend. It's not going to e6. He's not converting. He's not putting Nihal under pressure. I think at the right moment, MVL is looking towards knight e6. Knight e6, shutting off that light squared bishop. Then you don't have to worry about h3. Then you get a passed pawn there if black takes, and your bishop on c2 goes to b3. He's realized it because the last 5-10 moves have not been good.
And you know what? This might have been a move born of desperation. Oh, this is how I block the bishop from attacking my h3 pawn. But it's great for him. It's worked out. It's one of the best moves in the position, and it's really hard to avoid capturing. So yes, you need to take it. Yes, there's opposite bishops, but Eric, this game is far from drawn, far from equal. I think you can play bishop b3, but more importantly, rook d to g1, put some pressure on the g6 pawn. You're trying to force maybe g5 to be played, and the light squares become even weaker.
Yes, if you weaken the light squares, that light squared bishop will become only stronger. I do want to play bishop b3. I want to play king g2, but I think first things first, why not defend the e6 pawn?
Yeah, bishop b3 certainly does that. Queen g4 as well, but you know these moves are a little bit slower. You have to watch out long range for your f2 pawn. h4.
You know what? This is impressive. I said bishop b3. MVL recognizes you're going to attack my pawn on h3 by placing your queen on h6. Now my rooks are set up properly. I'm going to attack you.
h4 looks incredibly strong. I mean, first glance, queen takes h4, loses. You can play rook to h3. And if pawn takes, I mean, just the move rook to g6 alone is really scary. Now, before you can do anything here, Eric, you have to get rid of that pin. So rook h3, exactly. You have to get rid of the queen, pressuring the king on h2. Now the threat is obvious. Pawn takes on g5. He's looking to trade everything off.
G to G3 is an interesting move here, because then you're ready to take on G5.
Once
maybe
again,
Nihal plays Queen G6. So rook G1 to G3, maybe bishop B3 first, but all of a sudden MVL has the initiative.
And he's playing really well at this point. All it took was that idea, knight e6. Once he played that, everything sort of fell into place. I do think that queen g6 makes sense, because otherwise, the only move to keep the h-file closed, Eric, is pawn to g4. It's just a ridiculous move, but what else do you do?
You have to play Queen G6. You can't give up a second pawn.
There you go. We're wondering whether he's going to take right away. You know, another move that's on my mind is king g2. Just to shuffle the king over, get off those dangerous lines, protect f2, but he's got all the time in the world right now.
I really want to defend f2 because I never want this bishop on a7 to get into the game.
Yep.
We can't allow it to take on f2. Then it starts harassing the pieces. As long as that bishop, it's looking pretty on a7, but at the end of the day, black is down a pawn. White's queen, 2 rooks are all in the game. I see a deficit here that's going to be very hard to come back from.
Yeah, and one of the moves I was considering next was, let's move the queen. I'm not sure where. Maybe queen d3, queen g4, and play f4. It's the only other move that we haven't really activated. And I tell you, the rook on e5 is the main piece I want to get rid of.
MVL saying, I have safety on the light squares. If you give me a check on g1, I play king e2. This is a sharp way of dealing with it. It might not be the most precise, but the players are low on time. And look at that, rook check.
Oh, that's a huge move. That's a huge move. Rook g2, long range, the bishop from a7. We were saying you can't let it activate. Indirectly, it has. It's part of the position now.
I think
rook g2.
You might have to play rook g3 here. Can you really afford to allow rook takes f2? I said we didn't want the bishop on a7 in the game. It's in the game now. MVL's missed this move. And if rook g3 is played, that forces an opposite bishop endgame potentially.
Yeah, and I think he might have to do it. Now, you could allow rook takes f2 without your queen there, but okay, rook h6.
What a find. It keeps the queens on the board.
That's huge. I still think insane progress from Nihal. He's made a big comeback.
He's made a big comeback. His goal is to make sure White's queen never penetrates and coordinates with the e6 pawn to set up a mating net.
Yep.
That's not very easy to do. With the queen on h6, Nihal could have played king e7. He's playing queen h5 check, asking. If you play f3, that's only strengthening the dark squares for Nihal. Then he'll play queen back to h6.
Yep.
He's provoking f3. Then he goes queen h6. Then look at that e3 square.
Exactly. You want that pawn on f2 here, so you have to move your king. Of course, there's queen f3, but the reason we're not even considering this is if you trade queens, Eric, I think we're basically progressing to a position that has an amazing chance to just be a draw. Instead, he's going with the king into the center. King d3. This shows that he's playing for a win.
I think he might play c4 here, but then there might be queen b. Is queen b6 playable?
Queen b6, yeah, c5.
Queen e5 is good, actually. That's just as, it's even better. It defends f6, and you're looking at that d4 square.
Oh, this is trouble now. The queen is getting involved. Queen d4 is there. Even, I mean, queen g6 has to happen before white's making a threat. You're also hitting the e-pawn.
There's no time here. Nihal can start checking on the back. Is MVL going for a king walk, just like Anish?
Yeah, and remember, this is going to be very effective on the light squares. That's the thing about opposite bishops. Great control of the dark squares for black, the opposite for white. He also has c4 and e7 check at some point to open the diagonal.
But there's no immediate threat yet for MVL, so maybe Nihal plays a move like queen d2. And queen d2 is played because you recognize queen g6 doesn't work. There's queen takes f2. What kind of waiting move, what kind of stabilizing move can MVL play here?
He plays e7. I was wondering if, okay, queen g7 is the obvious follow-up, but also the move c5 is in the position.
Yeah, you
it
can't
locks
play
the
king
bishop
e6.
out.
You can't play king e6.
Yep, I love the move c5. Right now, it locks
And here
the bishop
comes c5,
out.
and
There's no queen takes
threats.
f2.
How do you stop? Okay, so after d takes c5, I think what is the move? Is it queen f7 check and bishop e6? You can take pawns with check. All of a sudden, the tables have flipped. The question is, can MVL dodge the checks?
Okay, he found a way to trade. Takes on c5, but the
MVL
two pawns connected, Eric.
It's even material, but it's, as you said, it's about the connected pawns. Can Nihal defend what looks to be a very tough position with 33 seconds?
And Eric, I know we're not this far ahead right now, but the a pawn and the bishop coordinate perfectly on the a8 square. It's the correct color, which means if the bishop sacrifices for the two pawns here, oh my goodness, we just got a lot of moves. c2, there's king d3.
Oh, MVL. No, Nihal's found a concrete line.
What a save.
You have to play bishop c2 here, but then there's no time.
But how is the time working out? Because MVL can flag this, and he's most certainly will.
He's up 15 seconds. He's got split pawns. Nihal has no counterplay.
I think this could be a win, but Nihal, this is where he thrives, Eric. You literally cannot count him out after what we just saw.
He's down 13 seconds, but look at the way he's playing. Is he going to march down the board?
I wonder. He can also
He can't go too far.
Yeah.
He can't allow that a-pawn to push.
King d5, he's not letting the king get around. Now with the pawn push, this is different. He's going after the pawn. Are we going to see a flag
MVL
take
has
place?
to flag him. He's got 10 seconds. Nihal's down to 8 seconds, but he's pre-moving like a madman.
Yeah, if he makes 50 moves, he can earn a draw. He's found the perfect repetition.
Well,
What?
MVL,
What was that?
what is he doing? Well, he could have kept playing him on. He could have made things hard. If Nihal had the other position, he would have looked for every single tricky move, and he would have started moving his king to chase away the bishop. There's no risk. There's no reason at all to push the pawn when you're up time, and you can't even lose the game. Even
Exactly.
If there's no way to possibly lose the game.
The game ends in a draw after all of that. And Eric, I think we're right to be critical. You know, this is the Esports World Cup. There's no increment. He definitely could have brought his bishop to defend that pawn. Then that would free his king to move around the board. The reason that Nihal was able to pre-move so successfully is he found two squares that were 100% safe. He went back and forth, and he was going to do that the rest of the game. But MVL could have moved his king in order to prevent that and cause Nihal to think again and spend more time.
No, for sure. This shows, I mean, Nihal's experience in online chess. He's pulling points out of nowhere.
Yeah, incredible. Pulling points that you would never believe are possible. That was a draw out of nowhere. It looked lost earlier, and then it looked like it should have been a flag.
Yeah, I think we can be very critical of MVL. There's two stages of that endgame that we probably would have disagreed with. When he had the 2 pawns versus 1, he could have waited longer before trading off one of them. Then at the final stage, there's absolutely no reason, if it's a draw by 50 moves, force your opponent to survive 50 moves.
Yeah.
Don't push the pawn to e7. There's absolutely no benefit at all.
Because he knows that his opponent, Nihal, is pre-moving to the e7 square.
Yes.
So that pawn push accomplishes nothing.
No, it's the only thing Nihal's pre-moving. And as you mentioned, okay, well, we're going straight to game 2. First game was a tie. Now Nihal Sarin will have the white pieces against MVL. Loser goes home.
And Eric, this is a decider match, right? The winner moves on in the Esports World Cup. I'm wondering whether that moment right there, MVL maybe choosing not to pursue that flag, is going to come back to bite him. Let's see. We talk about these, Grunfeld type of structures. This is, it's now transposed kind of to a London system a little bit, but against a Grunfeld setup that MVL is certainly known for.
Yeah, MVL's certainly known for it. It should be said, this is the second match of the day. They've both played a match already, so this isn't necessarily home prep. They probably prepared a little bit for their first match. They knew who they were playing. But here, as you mentioned, this is just standard Grunfeld setup versus a London, which, by the way, means in this opening, you see all the pieces on the board. You get rich positions from it. These players both embrace sharp chess. We saw that in the last game.
That's right.
It was good for white, then it was good for black, then it was good for white. At the end of the day, tied match. Here we go.
Yeah, and in this position, I look at the knight on a3, and one of the ways that knight re-enters the game is usually on the b1 square. Knight to b1 and back to c3. That's a much better square for the knight. Hitting d5, hitting e4. You never allow the knight to take the bishop. So bishop h2, an absolutely necessary reaction. And now that the b2 pawn is hit, Eric, I'm looking at queen b3, queen c2. Both moves look fantastic. I really like Nihal's position early on. A bit unorthodox for MVL. He's got the pieces kind of jumbled up together.
Well, I think unorthodox is the right way to say it. I'll say one thing. Grunfeld players are uncomfortable with this position. Why? Look at our bishop on g7. There's a pawn on f6 blocking it. If I push that pawn f5, then white has the e5 square. Why didn't he play queen b3? You suggest that as one of the candidate moves? Because black has problems to solve. Keep the pieces on the board.
Yep.
Now with the queens on the board, if MVL pushes further on the king side, at least if the queen's on the board, that'll be a better piece if you want to exploit those loose moves on the king side.
Now, I understand taking because it frees up the b5 square. That knight actually, in some cases, wants to retreat to c3. But I still think that we're kind of helping out MVL a little bit here.
What about queen b3 here?
Well, my instinct was bishop d3 earlier. Now, I don't think it's playable because the knight's on b5. So yes, queen b3 is necessary.
But this is just a bad position for black. You have no coordination. You have no stable squares besides the knight on e4. The knight on e6 is awkward because it blocks your e-pawn. The bishop g7, as I said, this is such a problem piece. Compare the bishops. The bishop on h2 has a full diagonal. The bishop on g7 has nothing. The bishop on g6, it's somewhat okay, but you have to weaken your king side to do so, and it's blocked by the knight on e4.
It should be back on f7, because what do you do about the d-pawn? Eric, a natural move like rook d8. I'm even looking at knight to c7. That could put you in an awkward spot with the bishop there. There's a lot of problems in this position immediately, and if rook d8's not played, there's not a good way to defend the d-pawn.
I think rook d8 is going to be played. I'm just looking for that punishing move for Nihal, because I think Nihal wants to keep the queens on the board unless he sees something good. You mentioned rook d8, there's knight c7. Is knight c7 good? Yes, but everything good is good. We have to compare and figure out what puts the most pressure on MVL.
Yeah, rook d8 played. I think after knight c7, he's planning to maybe capture the, well, at this point he could capture the queen, capture the knight. I don't think he will actually lose the d-pawn here. I still think that Nihal has an advantage. Question mark here. There might have been better in the position, but Eric, this looks like a very, very standard move.
Well, we're looking at a position where it's two results. White is better. White has the only open file. And I don't see any risk. There's no weaknesses. Even if black trades on b3, there's doubled pawns. Those double pawns aren't easily targeted by black, and white can use the c file. Maybe white can use the a file. And actually, what you can do with the double pawns is push it down the board to gain space. If you eventually trade on b3, I do a takes b3. I march that pawn down to b4 to b5, and I start grabbing more and more squares. They can actually be used as a weapon.
Absolutely right. This is really putting MVL in the think tank. Yes, he captures the queen, of course, but after knight c7, rook takes c7. The rooks can double on the open file. You're winning a pawn regardless. Yes, it's not the most important because you have those doubled b pawns, but Eric, big advantage for Nihal.
I'd rather be a pawn up than a pawn down. Bishop f8's a good move. That was a terrible piece before. He's preparing to go bishop d6, and I was even wondering if Nihal was going to take on b7 first or try to improve the position, play rook a1. He grabs the pawn, but now what does he have to consider? Endgames. I'm up a pawn, but how much can I actually trade? What exchanges favor me? One thing I notice is if you trade off the dark squared bishops, the c5 square is a bit weaker. Why am I looking at c5? I mentioned sometimes as white you push this b3 pawn to b4. That controls c5 and a5 a bit more. I'd love to get that knight on f3 to jump to e1, to jump to d3, to jump to c5. I want to use those doubled b pawns as an asset. If I don't, they're not as strong.
Yeah, that's right. And rook takes c7. Both moves look reasonable here, but he has to make sure that he keeps things closed. It's going to be huge counterplay for MVL if he can play rook c8, rook c2. Even up 2 pawns, if it's those doubled b pawns, Eric, it's probably not going to be enough to deal with the compensation there. So bishop takes c7. He might even have an idea of rook b8 here, and I think it's finally time for Nihal to bring the rest of the pieces into the game. I'm looking at the knight on f3. It's not been doing anything. It can't even move to d2. Knight e1 certainly presents itself as an option. Maybe bishop a5 and knight d2.
I have a move here that I think we saw Nihal play, bishop a6. Bishop a6 does the job of fixing that pawn on a7. Then the rook on a8 stays passive. Then we mentioned, bring the knight into the game, because at the end of the day, where's black's counterplay? Yes, we can talk about all the nice moves for white, but black gets to move. What is black going to do at that time?
Yeah, you need to bring the pieces in. Knight e1 and knight d3 does synergize very well with your idea of b4 and controlling the c5 square. So I really like knight e1, d3. I also like bringing the white king into the middle.
a5 is played, but here we see why the double pawns are fine. Black might eventually be like, I can't keep defending a5, I'm going to play a4. If you play a4, white captures, and then he is up a full pawn.
Yep, then the b pawn is still there. I was looking at the move bishop to b5 here, maybe to stop a4. He's desperate for that, open line for the
bishop
rook.
b5, bishop a4 looks really nice. You're controlling the diagonal, you're freezing the pawn, and you need to just buy yourself time. If white has opportunity, improve that light squared bishop, improve that knight. MVL needs to look for some sort of counterplay here, and it's looking tough.
He is going to stop the a4 move, so I like bishop b5. Now, similarly, bishop to b4 is probably going to happen from MVL. Knight d6, you have to take that. There's no question about that. You have stopped a4, but the bishop pair now, and with rook c8 coming, MVL might say, okay, take that pawn, I'm abandoning it. The knight on f3 is not doing anything. Remember, knight e1, d3 is a very slow plan, and rook c8 is coming next there.
So what about bishop d7? Bishop d7. Okay, he goes rook b6, also looks good. I was curious about bishop b7 to stop rook c8 and then try to bring the knight in.
I think that was the best move, Eric.
But I don't know if I could bring the knight in if I put my bishop on d7, because then I can't go to d3. Maybe that's what Nihal didn't like. Rook b6, I don't know about it, but at the end of the day, MVL has to deal with this. How do you defend the bishop on d6? I don't think you want to lose e6. Remember, if your bishop gets harassed on b5, like with rook b8 in the future, you have bishop a4. You're not even necessarily losing a pawn. And you're happy to lose a pawn if you win one of black's center pawns. At the end of the day, the b pawns are doubled.
I think he's considering rook b8 here. Maybe rook takes d6, rook takes b5, with some compensation going after those doubled b pawns. But if you're not playing that, I think rook d8 is perfectly fine here. At some point, you'll bring the king into the middle of the board for MVL. King f7, king e7, the bishop from d6. Once the e6 pawn is defended, can go to the b4 square nicely. And, you know, for the most part, those b pawns are not doing anything for a long time.
They're not doing anything for a long time, but we're still talking about a 2-result game, and Nihal's up 2 minutes on the clock.
Yep.
So he doesn't mind if this slows down. Black can bring the king in, but the problems aren't solved. At the end of the day, you're down a pawn, white's got activity, and there's some endgames you can't even enter. So I'm thinking knight e1. Maybe I play bishop d3. Would I mind trading off the light squared bishops? No. If I can, the knight on f3 is the key to the position.
Exactly.
If Nihal gets the knight into the game, I think his winning chances are very high. If doesn't get into the game, I don't know how you win the a5 pawn by force, and if you don't win it there is no passed pawn. There is no push.
Yeah, you have to bring the king and the knight. So king f1, king e2, knight e1, knight d3. I still like the idea of bringing the knight to the c5 square, and it's just all about the pressure. As long as you have MVL playing moves like rook d8, guarding the bishop, he's not fighting for rook c8. He's not, you know, making threats on the open file, and the bishops are very, very strong for black, but there's no immediate threat unless it's combined with a rook.
Nihal's investing a lot of time here. He knows this is critical. Is it time to bring the knight in, or can he play a move that restricts the king? I don't know if that's rook b7. I don't know if there's a time to play a move like g4, if that helps or if it hurts. It's quite hard. He plays king f1, bring the king in or bring the knight in. I mean, it's not a bad idea. When you don't know what to improve the king in endgame.
Yeah, bring the king to the middle, always recommended. I think black could do the same. King f7. Why do I like that move? It guards the e-pawn. I think that bishop c2, it's a great move to attack the pawn, but, you know, this threat is not that important. First of all, it can be prevented pretty nicely with bishop a4, but I think he might want that so he can maybe play bishop to d3, and, you know, he has the bishop retreating to a4. I think he needs to just bring the king in.
So after king e2, what's the trick that you're mentioning if I take the pawn?
No, I want MVL to play king f7 instead of hunting these pawns here. It just looks like, okay, it's a one-move threat, but I really like the idea of defending that e6 pawn to free my rook on d8. You know, I can move my bishop and then move my rook.
So one idea here is you can play knight d2, bishop b4, king e2. He plays bishop e2 as a way to defend. I don't mind that at all. If bishop b4, knight e1. We're expecting knight e1 here, finally unraveling, finally looking to remove the light squared bishops so the knight can find a square on d3. On a good day, not only do I get my knight on d3, I get my king to d2, so that I take away any rook squares if black eventually gets in the move rook c8.
And you can trade bishops. Bishop d3, trade the bishops off. The number one thing you want to do when you're playing against a bishop pair, if you have a bishop and a knight, is trade the bishop you have for the bishop of the same color.
Do you give a check here first if you're Nihal?
That's
and
a
he
good
gives
question.
the check just to force it, because the king doesn't have g6.
Yep.
Either you pin yourself by playing bishop e7, or you put your king on a worse square. Now, if you ever trade bishops, h7 is loose. So by just including rook b7, the pressure builds. MVL's getting desperate. He offers a rook exchange.
You have to take that. There's no way you can allow rook takes b3 with b2 falling as well. But Eric, this is now an endgame where he's going to be down a pawn.
I think you can take and play b4. You can prepare to play b4 at the right moment and get your king to b3.
Yep. I mean, there's only one person that can win this position, and I'm just sitting here watching this game, Eric, and I'm thinking back, why didn't MVL push at the end of last game? Because if Nihal wins this, he is going to be regretting that.
Yeah, so Nihal has the idea of b4 in the future, but he doesn't need that to win. In certain positions, knight c5 and a trade there would be a winning endgame. White would be in time to bring the king to c3 and play b4. But in the meantime, you know what he's doing? He's putting his pawns on light squares. Why do you do that?
Well, I mean, against a dark square bishop, you're putting pawns on squares that simply can never be attacked. In my opinion, this is too committal. This move was available at any time. If black played the move f5, I might be more interested in g4. I will say that I find this move a little bit early, and maybe the move bishop b4 kind of highlights that. He's saying all of a sudden g4, you've closed things up. If you take my bishop now, that's a pawn endgame. You're up a pawn, but they clearly don't matter doubled on the b file.
Amon, I think you're completely right. If doubled pawns are isolated and they're frozen like that, white can't trade into the endgame. There's no entry squares. That's why we're highlighting that Nihal trying to play the move b3 to b4. Yes, you sacrifice a pawn temporarily, but you're arguing your king can get there first. You'll eventually win that pawn back, and when you do, it'll actually be a mobile pawn. Here, we don't have that, and I think MVL has made huge progress. I don't see the breakthrough for Nihal.
Yeah, he definitely still has a pass pawn, right? h4, h5. So he's always got that. But what he doesn't really get to enjoy is that extra pawn. The black bishop does need to watch over the b4 square at all times. We start to see the shuffling from MVL. He might be looking for a position that's completely closed off here. And I think we're not far from a potential f5, h5 break. Nihal has 3 minutes and 30 seconds. He's going to take his time because, Eric, this is a position that he shouldn't lose. Question is he going to be able to win so he can avoid Armageddon?
He went for g5. I was looking at this move. After the pawn move f5, I was trying to figure out the endgames after knight e5 check, but the problem is that gives MVL a protected pass pawn. But g5, what he's trying to do, win the e5 square and place the knight there. But there is an issue here. There is an issue. The issue is lots of white's pawns are in dark squares. It means if you commit your king to one part of the board, there's a lot of liabilities here.
Yep, the bishop will sneak in to d2 or e1. The move f5 has been played, and Eric, this move has to be 100% correct, or it may be 100% wrong. It feels like there's not much in between because the knight's jumping into e5. He's thinking he can hold it.
Can you trade and play h5? Does that ever work? Or do you have to like massage the position? That's something to look for, but it probably doesn't work. Black just hugs the pawn and there might not be a square.
Right, and MVL, he's saying he's calculated this through. Yes, advantage for white. Congratulations, you have an extra pawn, but is it enough to win? After knight e5, he's always going king g7, and Eric, how do you break through? You can play knight e5, you can play knight c6, but I think he's just going to be going back and forth. So maybe one idea is you could try to play knight c6, knight d8, put some pressure on e6, try to combine it with h5, but how crazy is that?
He wants to put his knight on g3, but there's this bishop e1 move.
Yep, and he's not able to play king e2 to prevent bishop e1 because bishop d6, and all of a sudden you need to guard f4.
You know, one question is how does he win it? The other is, okay, Nihal had a time advantage. It's disappearing now.
Yep.
If he had this position with a minute on the clock each, again, we favor the knight. It's a two-result game. He can keep checking, forking, looking for ideas, and MVL has the tough task of repeating. Here, MVL has 2 minutes and 20 seconds. It's a lot of time to continue playing accurate moves. Oh my goodness.
He's offering the h-pawn, and you know, as creatures of habit, once we find our draw, we just want to repeat. The idea that MVL has is bishop on b4, so he's offering the h-pawn, saying, take it. I have a different idea. I'm going to all of a sudden have a b4 plan.
If you take on h4, the knight can potentially trap the bishop or win something. Bishop h4, knight f3, bishop g3, knight e5. You bring the knight back to d3, and then you shift your king over to f3. MVL realizes it's a poison pawn. We're back. He didn't take the bait, and if Nihal calculates and does that, I think that's a smart decision.
Yep.
And we're back to square one. How does white make progress here?
Yep, he took some time off the clock, though. That's important.
You have to worry about repetitions.
And this is why you stick to the draw that you already have, right? MVL was not worried before. The knight's back on f3, maybe going to e5. That's okay. He's already been in this position. He just needs to defend g6.
Is Nihal looking to shift his king over to g3? When will he commit knight e5? Maybe you play, as you mentioned, knight e5, knight c6, but he has to try something different.
Yeah, a knight e5, definitely a move to attempt. You got to put that in there. He brings the knight to d3. Let's see, bishop d6, always a risky move, right? You want to leave that bishop on the b4 square. There's just no entry. You can't take it.
At any moment, do you think Nihal should try to bring the king over and play h5? When do you pursue that?
I mean, now's as good a time as any, but remember, there's also bishop e1 to consider. The good thing is you're not really threatening to take on h4 because knight b7 ideas.
He's baiting him again, Amon. He wants the bishop to go to e1.
Of course he does, because remember, even if the bishop takes on h4, it's not guaranteed. right? That doesn't really change the position.
Is the bishop trapped? Because knight d3 was the move that contained the bishop. The knight's on c3 now. So how do you take away e1 as a square?
I think that bishop's coming back.
I think that's a blunder by Nihal. I don't see how that bishop gets trapped.
Well, you know, he is keeping the game alive, but he's also down time here. And you got to be very careful against MVL. He's actually bringing winning chances to this game.
I think Nihal has to turn into draw mode. He's trying to push for a win here. He finally has played b4. He'd like to get that king to b3. That knight on e2 defends f4 and d4. So is MVL going to swing the king over to defend b4? He can also argue, even if you attack b4, I'll eventually play bishop e1, and you can't actually win the b4 pawn by force without giving something up, because again, white's pawns are in dark squares. If white gets the king on b3, knight on d3, one of those pawns, d4, something could be hanging. It's very hard to coordinate, but MVL's spending so much time. He just had a 15-second edge. It's down.
Well, I think
again,
he's concerned, right? Knight c1, knight d3, how do you defend the b pawn? If you push the pawn, all of a sudden knight c5, he is picking up this pawn again. This is some kind of progress, because now maybe it's a little bit different.
It is progress. Nihal
Knight h4? He's missed knight h4. The idea of knight f3, knight h4.
You can't get in there. There's two squares, knight e5, knight h4. The king can't get in time. It's blocked out by knight e5 taking f7. And look at that.
He's going to resign. Oh my goodness, just the idea of knight h4. We saw the game end a little bit early in the first game. We were critical of that. And now he's even resigned this one, 20-second deficit. He was about to lose the G-pawn. Eric, Nihal Sarin, S8UL Esports. He's defeated MVL. He's eliminated him, and he's moved on in the Esports World Cup.
And we have to give him credit. He was pressing the whole game, and he's someone who maximizes his chances. He does not allow repetition. He keeps going, and he's through.
That's incredible. Nihal